Good morning. It is Sunday, Tes Zayin Shvat Tovshin Ayin Zayin. We are in Teres Menachem Sefer HaMamorim, Tovshin Yud Gimel, in the Mamar Vayehi Oimein as Hadassha, Purim, Tovshin Yud Gimel. Where are we up to? We're up to page Kuf Hey.
Really? We are up to Nifshach.
Yes, we are.
Omnam.
There's
Yeah.
about 6 lines.
So, to recap, the Rebbe here is explaining that there are two levels in Malchus, two dimensions to Malchus, two aspects to Malchus. There is a Malchus as it's referred to as Hadassha, and there's a Malchus as it's referred to as Esther. One is a reference to Malchus as it is in Atzilus, that's Hadassha, and Esther is Malchus as it descends into Bia. Similarly, in the Neshama, we also find these two levels, these two dimensions. There is the higher dimension of the Neshama and the lower dimension of the Neshama. These are known as Yisrael and Yaakov. Yaakov being the part of the Neshama that clothes itself in the body. Yisrael being a reference to the part of the Neshama that remains transcendent. In general terms, we're talking about the Etzem HaNeshama, the essence of the soul. Because as the Rebbe said, not the entire soul clothes itself in the body. It's an aspect of the soul that clothes itself in the body, namely Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama, whereas the transcendent aspects of the soul remain transcendent, generally known as the Etzem HaNeshama. How does this play out in Aveda, in a man's service of Hashem? So the Rebbe says, we will focus on Ahava, on serving Hashem with love, because as the Zohar says, Leis pulchana ki pulchana derichu musa. There is no greater service of Hashem than the service out of love. And if you remember, we explained that the reason for this is, as it's brought in other places in Chassidus, fear imposes, love transforms. So when a person loves Hashem, that actually brings about transformation. The Rebbe doesn't bring it in the Maimon, but that's one of the explanations of Chassidus why Ahava is a greater, deeper service than Yira. Love is a greater service than Yiras Hashem. So the Rebbe said, in Ahavas Hashem, there are different levels. First of all, he focused on the pasuk in Shema, V'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha, you should love Hashem, b'chol levavcha, or b'chol nafshecha, or b'chol medecha. Right? First of all, the level of b'chol levavcha. It's an ascending order. Love Hashem with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. That's generally how it's translated. With all your heart, loving Hashem with all your heart is love that results from his bonus, contemplating the fact that God is our life source. Right? And because life is good, people gravitate to that which is good. A person gravitates naturally to that which is good, and is repelled from something that's the opposite of good, that's negative. So being that life is good, spirituality, holiness, godliness is good, so that brings the person to love Hashem. But, says the Rebbe, this love has a limit, because since we're talking about a contemplation, a love that emanates from a contemplation, from a realization that God is our life force, being that the life force of the world is a contracted emanation of Hashem, so therefore correspondingly, the love is limited. The life force is limited in accordance to the characteristics and the capacity of each creation, each created being. So therefore, the love that emanates out of contemplating this level of godliness is also limited. A higher level of love is the love of b'chol nafshecha, which, as Chazal say, as the sages say, what does it mean b'chol nafshecha? Afilu neitel es nafshecha. Even if, God forbid, one's life is being threatened, continue to love Hashem. Right? Says the Rebbe, where does this love come from? From contemplating that the entire life force of the world and of the human being is merely a ha'ara, a ray of Hashem. In other words, Hashem is much greater than that. Why? Because as the Rebbe quoted, the entire creation is a result of one thought, of Hashem's single thought. From a single thought of Hashem, the world was created. What's the relationship between a single thought of a human being relative to the complete body of his thoughts throughout his life? Very, very insignificant, tiny. How much more so one single thought of Hashem relative to Hashem's very essence is infinitely insignificant. right? There's no relationship at all. So when we realize that the whole Chayas Ha'olamus, including the man which is in it, is merely from a tiny little ray of Hashem's greatness, that this all came about, right? That brings the person to the level of Avas Hashem, known as Bechol Nafshecha. Afilu Netelas Nafshecha, even to give away one's life for the sake of Hashem. That's where we're up to. So page Kuf Hey, 6 lines from the top at the full stop. Omnom says the Rebbe, despite the fact that what we just explained, that this second level of love Bechol Nafshecha is at a higher level. Nevertheless, be'emes inigam ahavazuk shur b'agbala, this love is also connected to some limitation. Why? How? The kiv and sheba mehai his bonus, since it comes as a result of the contemplation. Shechai yisrael misuraka arabulvad, that the life force of the worlds is merely a ray of Hashem's very essence, v'hainu. Meaning to say, in other words, despite the fact that Rebbe is not focusing now on the tremendous insignificance of this ray relative to Hashem, but he's talking about in the other way around, meaning to say, one does recognize, one does feel the life force of the world, this insignificant life force of the world, that animates worlds, right? It's just that he contrasts that to the greatness of Hashem, but he's mindful and aware very powerfully and very directly of the life force of the world. So, v'hainu. This means to say that he feels the life force of the world. But what? He negates it by saying it's merely a ray. But he does actually feel the life force of the world. He recognizes that. Therefore, this level is also connected to limitation. Because you're still focused and mindful of the fact this whole life force of the world is merely a ha'ara, merely one thought, and so on and so forth. So it still has some limitation. Therefore, these two levels of love, the limited love emanating from the first contemplation, which is the love of all your heart, and the second level of love, which is the love of b'chol nafshecha, with all your soul, which is at least connected in some way to limitation. These two levels of love, this comes about from the aspect of the soul known as Yaakov, which is what? Which is merely a ray of the soul. So both these loves are associated to the lower level of the neshama known as what? Yaakov. But the purpose of this, the goal of man's service of Hashem, is to arrive to the aspect of love known as b'chol me'edecha, with all your might, all your me'ed, meaning shehu bli gvul legamri, which is totally limitless. The second level of love, we said, has an aspect of limitlessness in it, but it's still connected to limit. Why? Because it comes as a result of recognizing the life force of the world, which is necessarily limited, but just contrasting that to the very essence of Hashem. Here, we're talking about me'edecha bli gvul legamri, total limitlessness. Says the Rebbe, even though the word me'edecha means your limitlessness, so again, we're talking about what? A grade of limitlessness, because there's your limitlessness, there's someone else's limitlessness, and so on and so forth. Right? We'll get to that in a second. Mikol Mokim, nevertheless, it is still beyond limitation altogether. Right? First of all, a word on levels of limitlessness, degrees of limitlessness. For example, very basic example. Take a number. A number. A number is a finite, identifiable unit. Take, for example, the relationship between a single number, one unit, relative to, I don't know, 1 billion or 10 billion or 100 billion. Very minute, but there is still some relationship, right? Because the big number is made up of so many multiples of the single unit. Now take one unit of a number relative to infinite numbers. What's the relationship? It's infinite. There's no relationship. But it's still not true limitlessness because they're both still numbers. They live in the same world. They're in the same realm. This is one number, and these are infinite numbers, but they're numbers nonetheless. You take a unit of a number relative to Chochmah Atzilus, for example. The relationship there is far more infinite. So we see that in infinite or in limitlessness, there are degrees. That's number one. Now, number two, we're talking about something here. What is the difference, for example, between the Ava B'chol Labavcha and B'chol Meidecha? I'm sorry, B'chol Nafshecha and B'chol Meidecha. The Rebbe says that the love that comes as a result of B'chol Meidecha, the love of B'chol Meidecha, is truly limitless. Even though it's Meidecha, my limitlessness. So in other words, it's still confined to some kind of frame. Still, it's true limitless. It's truly limitless. So they refer to Torah and Pashas Miketz, if you look in footnote 39, reference 39. Over there, the Alter Rebbe says a very interesting concept. He contrasts water to fire. In other words, what are we looking at? The point over here is, how could something that is finite, because it's Ma'ideh the Cho, right, yet contain a true aspect of limitlessness, having it real limitlessness. So he contrasts fire to water. He says water, you have a tremendous quantity of water. But if you keep on sharing that water with, you'll pour them into individual cups and share them with people, ultimately it'll run out. It's finite. Fire, you could light as many candles as you want from a single fire, and it will not diminish. You could light a limitless number of fires from a single fire. So on the one hand, you see what? It's fire. It's not water. So it's a finite, identifiable existence, right? And yet it contains in it a limitlessness, where it doesn't end. You can keep on lighting fires from it.
It's actually limited to the keli that goes to. It's limited by what?
Correct. So the fact that it's limited to the keli, it has that specific candle burns, or that specific piece of wood, or you know, the coals. That's exactly the point that Rebbe makes. So the Rebbe says, when it comes to the neshama, that's what the Alter Rebbe explains over there, that despite the fact that it's me'oy shelcha, it has the ability to touch the b'li gvul amiti of Hashem. That's the point that Rebbe is trying to make over here. That what? That the ava of b'chol meidecha is truly, that is related to what? To the etzem neshama, right? It's similar to the fact that every Jewish soul is specific to that person. A soul that is confined to a body is confined to that body. Not only the part of the soul that's clothed in the body, but even the etzem haneshama that's above is associated specifically to this person. And yet, despite it being identified with a specific individual, if one taps in to the resources, to the level of the soul, to the etzem haneshama, to the Yisrael aspect of the soul, even though it's ma'ideh, yet it is true bli gvul, and it has the ability to touch the bli gvul ha'amiti of Hashem. That's the point that Rebbe makes. So let's see how the Rebbe fleshes it out. This love of b'chol ma'ideh, where does that emanate from? The first two loves, come as a result of what? Contemplating Hashem's ability to create, to animate the worlds, whether directly or the contrast between the power that animates the world relative to Hashem. The Ava B'chol Meidecha, you contemplate the wonderfulness of the Ein Sof, how unbelievably removed and infinite Ein Sof is. How the Ein Sof is what? Completely removed from the chain order of creation. Not only is he so great and powerful and limitless, right, and all-encompassing, that he's removed from Ishtalshalus, say the Ishtalshalus, even more so. He's essentially removed. Right? Hashem's very essence is completely beyond everything. In other words, yes, of course, say that Hishtashalus and creation comes from Hashem. But when we talk about Hashem himself, can we give any significance to his ability to create or his relationship with creation relative to who he really is? He is so great that say the Hishtashalus doesn't even come into the frame. In the second contemplation, we say the whole of creation and the whole life force that animates the world is merely a ha'ara. So you're focused on the ha'ara, and you contrast it, you're focused on the emanation of the ray, and you contrast it to Hashem's greatness. Here, you're focusing on Hashem's greatness as he is on his own. And when we focus on that, nothing is significant. Through this, he arrives to the love of what? To which level of love? With all your with your limitlessness. Again, just like the first two loves are limited to the degree of the contemplation which brings you to that level of love, similarly here, since what are you contemplating? The true limitlessness of Hashem, the true greatness of Hashem, the true exaltedness of Hashem, which is totally limitless. How he's so exalted and removed. Essentially, therefore the love that emanates from this is also exalted, essentially. Meaning to say that this love is exalted and removed from all the person's matters and all the person's limitations, even removed from negating limit. It's essentially limitless. This love stems from where? From the aspect of the soul known as Yisrael, which are what? The transcendent aspects of the soul. The very innermost, and the very essential most aspect of the soul. In Mitzvah Hashem, we will continue in Mitzvah Hashem tomorrow.